The Florida Horse Podcast is presented by the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association.
Welcome to the Florida Horse Podcast, brought to you by the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association. I'm Tammy Gantt, and I'm joined by our wonderful guest today, University of Florida professor, Dr. Saundra Tenbroeck. Let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Tenbroeck, to the studios. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I was looking at your credentials, and it was quite a bit because you've been in the industry so very long. But you work at University of Florida, and you work under the Animal Sciences Department, and you're an associate professor. So tell me just a little background about what that role involves in addition to your state extension work.
Sure. I came to Florida a long time ago, my 29th birthday in 1985, and I was hired to be a youth livestock specialist. So one of the three branches of the university in a land grant situation is the Cooperative Extension Service. So my primary focus was young people and animal science, whether it's 4-H, FFA, Junior Breed Associations, Pony Club. And my target species was all of them: beef cattle, sheep, hogs, and horses. After 17 years, I became 100% equine focused to work in adult and youth programs for horse education for lay people across the state.
Yeah, and I noticed that, and I also noticed that under Hodges that you had done previous research, even though that's not your current prong today.
Sure.
And I know we were just talking a little bit ago. Tell me a little bit about that research and how it ended up in Ocala, of all things.
Sure. My undergrad was at Clemson. I went to graduate school at Texas A&M, and my area of focus was reproductive physiology. And my major professor assigned me my master's project, and that was looking at the effects of photoperiod on gestation length in mares.
I'll say that one more time for those that didn't hear it.
So gestation length on average is 340. That's what we kind of use to calculate expected foaling date. But we know horses have a huge range, could be 330 to 365. And so we know that when you look at mares, there was some empirical data that January through April, if you look at month of foaling, on average, you saw 10 days difference in gestation. Some people like to say, well, it depends on if it's a colt or a filly, or it depends on nutrition. So there's a large number of things that statistically could contribute to variation in gestation length. What we did is we put mares under lights for 2 hours at dusk, because there was good information. That's all you needed in terms of their circadian rhythm in perceiving light. And we got a response. And so the mares that were due to foal January, February, and March. So by April, they already have long days, right? And the normal average date of first ovulation for horses is April. So mares are wired to start ovulating in April to foal in March, April, May. So we want to move those up on the calendar, but sometimes you'll move a mare up by putting an open mare under lights, get her bred in February, she foals in January, but instead of going 340, she goes 360. So the whole idea of the light treatment is to keep those mares in a normal gestation length. And so that's what the project was about. And super cool, a wonderful researcher in Ireland took that research and turned it into a product called Equilume.
Yeah, so, which we saw here. They came here from Ireland. They presented that, and it was interesting because to know that research actually can be taken off, leapfrogged into something that's actually a product that people can use.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing. And I do think that you also hit on something that is very important for the university and for IFAS, which is things are science-based.
Yeah.
So we anecdotally as horse people can say, well, I think it's because she had a cold, or this mare always does this, but there is actually science behind everything that comes out of the University of Florida and all the types of programs that you're involved with.
Sure. And the cool part, we repeated that project twice, which made my master's run a little long. But the good news is, by random allotment, there were some mares that received light treatment 1 year, but were under natural day length the next. And we also saw 10 days difference on average on those mares that received one treatment 1 year and one treatment the next. So we do know with statistical significance that extended days affect gestating mares in the same way that they affect open mares coming into the breeding season. And the foals were as big or slightly bigger. So the accelerated growth of the foal was happening. So.
Which is important for the breeders, I think. And also just the date of foaling is important because when the horses can foal in that springtime period, it's really important. So they end up with a horse that's foaling late. So then they have to leave her open. So there's a lot of things that are important for that. And then you also mentioned something I didn't know was an innovation to it, where the original light or hat, if you will, that was put on the mares, then as far as in practice, they don't use the left side. It only needs to be attuned to one eye.
Sure. I think when you invent something, you tweak it as you use it, so that these little hats are made out of Kevlar. They're little caps and they attach to the halter. And if you think about light treating gestating mares, you got to bring them in a stall. Then that's labor. You got to clean the stall. The mares really need to be kicked out if they can be on pasture. And they only needed to be treated in one eye. They could perceive the extended day with just one eye. So they put a little cup on the right side with an LED light and a photo sensor, so it came on at dusk and it turned off 2 hours later, and the left eye is completely
Like
open.
a little horse AI Google glass.
There you go.
To cut you off.
More AI.
There we
AI
go.
it touches everything.
There we go. So
Artificial intelligence.
Yes, yes. And we will, not artificial insemination. We have to be very careful in the equine world or ag world, which one we're talking about. So we've known AI for a lot longer in the ag world than they have known artificial intelligence in the rest of the world. And so let's go back a little bit and talk about your state extension role and what are some of the things that you're seeing trend-wise or things that you'd like for people to know?
Well, my main focus in my extension role, which now has shrunk to about 50% because I have a huge teaching role within the department. So my primary target audience is 4-H because that is the youth component of the extension service. But I also target young people enrolled in agri-science and help with career development events like horse judging for kids in FFA. A lot of kids want to be in the horse project because they want to show, but we also offer horse judging at the competitive level, and they can go to national competitions. We offer quiz bowl, we offer speech contests. They have horseless horse project books, so there's a tremendous amount of curriculum and events that young people can be involved in, even if they don't own a horse. And so getting the word out and getting people involved that way is something we continue to strive to do.
Yeah, well, that lays the groundwork for a person interested in the horse, like you said, to begin to start that learning, so that if they one day want to be in the thoroughbred industry, they've already started to make that approach. Sure. Obviously, the hands-on are very, very important if they're working directly with horses in the industry, but sometimes there are jobs that aren't those direct ones, that if they have a horse knowledge, they can begin to move into those roles.
Sure. We also offer 2 weeks of horsemanship school where young people bring a horse to campus. They stay at our horse teaching unit. They stay in the dorms. They get exposed to our faculty. They ride twice a day, and then we have educational programs. We come to Ocala for a visit as well during the week. Each week comes. So we've seen a lot of those kids that have come through the 4-H program have come to horsemanship school that it really did grab hold of them, and they're now students in our program. So it's self-perpetuating, and we really love that.
Yeah, and I love the idea of you're almost like a summer camp away in a university environment, and so you're getting the best learning in a place that has all those skill sets to really help accelerate what you're doing. You told me a story earlier, and I'm going to digress just a little.
Sure.
We were trying to identify if there were some folks in history that I had found that were Tenbroeck, so you're Dr.
Sure.
Tenbroeck, and you had mentioned a story that I found fascinating related to horses during the Civil War.
Sure.
And so I guess take me back to that moment.
Okay. It's really funny because when I first came to Florida, I started teaching a course called horse production, and I went to the library. Olden days, people don't go to the library much, but I found this great thoroughbred history book, and I'm flipping through this book, and I find this picture of a guy named John Wessel Tenbroeck, and he came from the Albany, New York area. That was New Holland.
Spelled the same way as Sheridan.
Spelled the same way. There was actually a space between the N and the B. And so the Tenbroecks, that's where they all originated, from New Holland. And he was a major player in the early thoroughbred industry. And the Tenbroeck horse was buried on the Harper farm, John Harper.
And they had the thoroughbred horse named Tenbroeck.
Yes. Yeah. So they had a horse named Tenbroeck. It was named for him. He didn't own it. But they worked together as a group to try to gather up brood mares and hide them and protect them during war times, specifically the Civil War. so that they didn't, because as many horses died in war times as people did. And so protecting those really
Actually being
well-bred
shot
mares.
during like
Absolutely.
actual
Yeah, broken
battles,
legs
and then also just escaping and being
and
in the wild
starving
and
to
not
death,
being able to survive.
being on the move all the time. So yeah, when you take a look at history, famine and disease kill more soldiers and horses than actual guns and cannons. So yeah, so that he played a role in the early American thoroughbred by trying to hide some of those brood mares, and then he was affiliated with the stallion Lexington, and the Tenbroeck horse and the horse Lexington are both buried on this what's now a cow pasture. I visited there with my family one time. We climbed across a fence and went out in the cow pasture. You can Google it and you can see the tombstone.
Yeah.
So
and I do remember seeing a painting somewhere of Tenbroeck, and when you said it, then it hit me. Oh yeah, it's got that space between the N and the
there's
B.
a folk song. He beat a back in those days they would run heats. So they galloped a long ways and and would do heats in a day. And so he beat a mare named Molly, who would be the olden times version of Zenyatta, so undefeated. And so they wrote this folk song about the Tenbroeck horse beating the Molly mare. It was a sloppy, wet conditions, and he was a better mud horse than she was. But yeah,
maybe that's where the
but
term
I'm
mudder
a Hodge,
came from.
and so Tenbroeck's my married name. But it was really cool when I met my husband's grandmother and showed her that book and let her read about it. She had a picture of the Tenbroeck horse on her wall, and she asked me if there was anything I wanted when she was getting elderly, and I said, I only want one thing. She said, you want the picture, don't you? So I have
Is that like a Career Knives? Maybe I feel like it must have been a popularized print and a popular racehorse that there were lots of prints available at that era.
He held the record for decades.
So do you have that print hanging in your office?
In my office, yeah, absolutely. Also with the article that talks about how long it takes for a horse record to be broken, whereas in human, we break records all the time. And we don't have breeding programs for being better sprinters or distance runners, but human records are broken all the time, but horse records last decades.
Dr. Fager, 1968. Florida bred, by the way, still holds the world record for a mile set in Arlington Park. So very exciting. You and I got together a few months ago before they launched the National Equine Economic Impact Survey through the American Horse Council. Last one was in 2017, stats released in 2018. And so tell me a little bit why you think it's just so important that equine suppliers and horse owners get out there and fill out this survey.
Sure. Well, as an industry, horses are very different livestock group than cattle or pigs because we don't necessarily have that lobbying power that the national cattlemen's would or the national pork producers because we're so segmented as an industry. But the racing industry probably does the best job of lobbying to help us get tax laws, primarily in terms of how we run a business, right to farm, things that are going to favor horse ownership and horse production and horse management. And what our legislators need is data sets to show economic impact, because if the industry that you're trying to have positive laws made for doesn't make a difference in terms of contribution to the gross national product, then nothing's going to happen.
Job.
So the American Horse Council does this every 5 years. We had a 1-year delay because of COVID, but every 5 years they do this economic impact survey, and that provides educators, lobbying groups, politicians with the ammunition they need to help people understand why it's important that we do what we do and continue to be able to do that.
And we saw that in action this year at the legislative session, because the strength of the thoroughbred industry is what helped us gain that $55 million, because we were able to show the economic impact that we provide, the jobs we create, the land that we preserve. And again, it was thoroughbred specific, but it really is all equine. So when we do the study or the survey, it is actually all breeds and disciplines in the state of Florida. And it drills down to Marion County and specifically all breeds and disciplines. And FTBOA is the sole funder for that in Florida. So it doesn't skew the results that we're the funder, but what it does is we make sure that survey happens. And so we need all the horse practitioners and businesses and ones that are new that aren't thinking about it right now to get out there and fill out these surveys. And we're talking racetracks, the sales company, the show arenas, your 4-H youth, all those programs to take a minute to fill that out. So like you said, we have great data so that we can show the strength of the industry, or if there's places that we might need some assistance or areas that we could work on, like you said, for tax incentives, and things that can make a difference as to how we have the horses, living in the state of Florida.
Sure. Well, it doesn't take long to complete the survey. They even have some incentives for some donated gifts, so your name goes in a drawing, and it's open till September 29th. So I hope everybody that watches this will take a moment and go to that survey and go ahead and fill it out so that we can have the more data points you have, the stronger the decisions you can make. And the race industry, based on the 2017, is the largest economic impactor of the 4 major segments, horse showing being the second largest. So racing is important, continues to be important, and we need to see the data to help other people understand that.
Yeah, I think for all segments, it's very, very important. Well, thank you for coming in today.
It was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Actually, time flew. And so we'll have to have you back again sometime soon.
Love to talk about our teaching program. We just got a legislative budget request for doing some renovations at our horse farm. So I'd love to talk about that and our endowment with you sometime.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming in.
The Florida Horse Podcast is presented by the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association. The American Horse Council encourages Florida horse owners and businesses to take the Economic Impact Survey. Showcasing the economic impact from this survey helps inform local and state political leaders, encourages investment in land and equine businesses, and job impact. Take the survey today. Visit horsecouncil.org. This public service announcement is brought to you by Horse Capital TV and the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association.